Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabetch Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabetch Bachman.
Hello, and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results, where we talk to experts about how to improve our presentation skills. Whether you're speaking on a stage or in a meeting or just to convince one particular person, there are hundreds and hundreds of tools that we can use to get the results that we need. This podcast is all about learning more tools, learning the craft of communication so that we can get results. Before we begin, I want to invite you to go to the speakforresultsquiz.com, and you can take a free assessment, takes about 3 minutes, just to see where your speaking skills are, where you might be able to get a little help, and where you are rocking it. So speakforresultsquiz.com. And today I am so psyched because I have the amazing Elissa Weinzimmer. And I've just come back from Europe, so I keep wanting to say Weinzimmer. I know. You're in New York, that's how you pronounce it. And Elissa is a voice and presence coach. And she's the founder of Voice-Body Connection. Elissa suddenly lost her own voice at age 21. Oh my God, I would have been terrified. So I definitely want to hear about that. She stopped performing and began studying the mechanics of voice. And over time, she developed a unique, concrete approach to voice coaching that empowers leaders, speakers, and performers to optimize their voices and share them more powerfully and authentically. Elissa's clients include Broadway stars, television personalities, politicians, and the heads of startups and major corporations. She's led programming for WeWork, Equinox, Microsoft, eBay, Instacart, the Skirball Cultural Center, the Columbia School of Public Health, and the Voice Foundation. She's got an MFA in Theater Voice Pedagogy from the University of Alberta and a BA from the University of Southern California. She's certified in Fitzmaurice voice work, that's trademark, and also Hatha Yoga, which makes total sense that works together. And she's currently pursuing somatic movement educator training in body-mind centering. And she got an award in 2014, the Clyde Vinson Award for Excellence from the Voice and Speech Trainers Association. She's based in New York City, my old stomping grounds, and she's currently working on her first book. So Elissa, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to have you here because after spending 30 years as an international opera director, I came from the theater side. So I never had vocal training. I was a folk singer when I was a kid. That was when Joan Baez was hot. And all you really had to do was sing loud enough to be over the guitar. Never that I would need to actually really have to sing. And then I started working with singers. And so I know enough about the art of vocal production to say, I give that to experts like you and work on strategy. So I'm really excited to have you here. And those of you who are just listening, I hope you will come back and watch the video because I'm going to see if I can get Elissa to show us some of her very cool voice warm-ups. Because I know I've got lots of bad vocal habits, so I'm always interested in hearing tips. However, before we start, this is one of the things I ask all my guests. If you were to share the stage with someone no longer living, who would it be? What would you talk about? and who would be listening?
Mm. Thanks for this question. It's fun. So I would choose something personal. If I were to share the stage with someone from history, I would choose my great grandmother, Augusta.
Mm.
And that's because if you're giving me the power to call someone back from the dead, that's someone I'd really like to meet.
I love it. Yes.
And the reason I'd like to meet her is because I am told that we share some like musical talents, that she was like creative and she used her voice, etc. And I'd really just love to know who this woman was. You know, I spent so long of my childhood. I think it's a thing in the West that we don't think about our ancestors very often. We don't consider who they are. And so I just spent a long time in my childhood only thinking to my grandparents' generation and never beyond. And I think when I did think that far back, I just assumed they were really boring people who had no personalities. Isn't that funny? And so, yeah, I would love to meet my grandmother. So if I could call her back from the dead,
grandmother or great grandmother?
My great grandmother, Augusta, right? My grandmother who is great. And I would have her onto my podcast, which is called How to Speak Your Truth. And I would ask her questions about what it means to her to speak her truth and what's important to her. And we could live record that. That would be super cool.
Very cool. That is very cool. What years did she live?
Oh, I don't know exactly. That's a great question. Let's see. She would have, for some reason, the year like 1881 is coming to me. Like I can always cheat and look on ancestry.com, but her generation was the generation. So, okay, now I have to go back in the lineage. This is my mother's mother's mother. And they were a Orthodox Jewish family that moved from, in her generation, they moved from the old country, like the Eastern Bloc of countries, to Denver, Colorado. And they probably came to Denver in the 10s or 20s, 1910s or 20s. I think she was probably 20 or 30 then. So 1880s is my guess, but I'd have to check.
Okay. I was having visions of her standing in a salon singing a Schubert song or something.
Oh, wow. I don't know if she ever did
But in
something
Denver,
like that. I want to ask her.
Yeah. I mean, Denver had its society and so.
Yeah. She had 8 children. So I know she spent a lot of her time that way.
Okay.
Yeah. So interesting.
Okay, great. Well, let's go to the present day then. And Elissa, you and I actually are both on a course for women, for career women. This is how I met you. And we both have modules on this course for career development. What did you talk about for women in careers to advance their careers? Why is voice important?
I wish I could remember exactly what I talked about, but I'll have to just say something anew. Voice is so important for women in their careers, right? Our voice is one of our biggest tools. And in fact, I'll just bring awareness to the fact that mine is not in literal tip-top shape right now. It's a little bit raspy because I had a cold. So, if we lose our voice, we can't speak in meetings. If we have a voice that kind of irritates other people or grates on them, then they may not take us as seriously as we would like them to. Our voice is our biggest tool for communication, aside from, if we're writing emails or reports or things like that. But truly, it's the way that our personality is read and perceived. So it's really important for women who are working in corporate settings or as entrepreneurs, interfacing with their own clients or other partnerships or whoever it is. It's really important that we feel that we have a dexterous instrument to use in our voice. If we don't, then we're constantly all day long fighting this uphill battle where we're using a tool that we don't have a strong, healthy relationship with.
So do you find, one of the things you hear a lot is people who talk like this, especially women who talk like this, and they end the sentence with a question, and that depositions you. But what else, what other problems do people have that come to you?
Yeah. So in terms of vocal inflection, in terms of literal contours of the sounds of your voice, the ones that I hear most often, there's vocal fry, which is when people talk at the bottom of their pitch range. And I have extra access to it right now as someone who just had a cold. So vocal fry is not super helpful. And a lot of times it just happens at the end of a sentence because we trail off. And so we go into vocal fry.
Well,
So,
and I was just going to say, and then what happens there is you lose the last word of the sentence.
right.
And
Or the momentum and I
yeah.
call it like the gymnast sticking the landing type thing. You lose your landing. Right?
Yeah, good point. All right. Yeah.
So, so vocal fry is a common one. Up talk, where you go up at the end of a sentence or the end of an utterance, even if it's not a question, is one you just mentioned. Up talk, up speak. But really, any pattern is going to get in the way of someone's understanding. So even if it's a monotone pattern, if I stay down here all the time, or if it's a high pitch pattern, I stay up here all the time, or if it's just me going, so everybody, it's really important that we finish these reports. Da-da-da-da-da. It doesn't matter what the pattern is. The deal is that the human brain wants to categorize a pattern. The human brain wants to go, oh, that's not novel. I can predict that. And it wants to send it down into like parallel processing land and then pay attention to something that's new and novel. So when we're speaking with a vocal pattern, what we actually do, ironically, is we trick people into not listening to our message.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes if you hit a pattern that sounds like mom, as a woman in business, it sounds like mom or the school marm, then you get an automatic pushback.
Yes. And so that's the other thing about patterns is that patterns a lot of times have sociological and psychological implications as well.
Yeah.
And I think that there are two approaches to rectifying that issue. One is to get rid of the vocal fry, get rid of the uptalk, get rid of the shrill, pressed, sounding like your mother yelling at you type sound. Sure. Another important part of the equation, in my opinion, is to educate the general populace on those patterns don't necessarily equal unintelligent.
Uh-huh.
And the reason I think that's important is because if we don't bring this stuff up to the surface, then we as women, in examining our vocal patterns, might unconsciously go, oh, I suck. That's terrible. I shouldn't do that. When in fact, a much more productive process is to go, oh, I'm doing vocal fry. And that's not only leaving me vocally fatigued, but people can't understand my message. And I now, having noticed that I do that, choose not to do it. And I'm going to choose to do a different pattern. That way of navigating the choice of navigating the situation is a much more productive way of making a change than going, everyone hates vocal fry. I sound stupid when I do vocal fry. I shouldn't vocal fry.
Right. What do you find with men, with your male clients?
Yeah, they do vocal fry too. Ira Glass is a great example on This American Life of vocal fry all the time. So really, truly, just because what ultimately we're getting to is patterns are the enemy of deeper understanding, then men just wind up with different patterns, right? Like it may be this like deep authoritative pattern of speaking, or it may be this sort of like bullet, like type pattern that's like stereotypically masculine. The main thing, and this is not necessarily gender specific, and now I'm getting away from inflection and into actual content and words and meaning, is very often we go into this mode where we spew words. And what I mean by that is that we've said these things 1,000 times, especially if we're giving a speech that we prepared and memorized. It's really, really easy to go into the mode of spewing words. And that's a very left brain linear, like 01101 type computer processing way of speaking. And what we actually want to do, what feels human, what feels genuine, what feels authentic, is speaking from a more right brain frame of mind, which is thinking in thoughts. So the differentiation I explain is words versus thoughts. If you're spewing words, then your audience is just going to hear a string of words. But if you're thinking in thoughts, then the audience can understand your thoughts. And I think for whatever reason, just because we have less hangups over men's vocal inflections, I wind up giving this note to men sooner. But the note is for all humans of all gender.
So let me ask you another one, because here's one that I have found a lot. I work internationally, and I work with a lot of people who are doing speeches in English where English is not their first language.
Yes.
And the inflection that they have in French or Sanskrit or Hindu or Chinese or Japanese, you can hear people on the street and you can tell if they're speaking Japanese or Chinese because of the melody of, I call it the melody of the message.
I was just going to call it the same thing.
Yeah. All those years, we both work with singers. So
exactly.
The melody of the message, and then they get into another language and the vocal range shrinks.
Yes.
Yes. So what do you do with that?
So a lot of times speakers are retaining the melody of their L1, as we call it, their first primary language, into their L2. So to start playing around with pitches and the melody of the phrase that my graduate school professor taught me that I love, that I share, is let every thought have its own energy. So we want to let each thought be a package that has its own contours of pitch and sound. And one metaphor that I actually give for it often is if you imagine this shelving unit back here, and I wanted to display all my ideas on the shelf, each shelf has a different pitch corresponding to it, right? So this is where I put my plants, and this is where I put my books, right? Mm-hmm. You can hear how my vocal inflection changed. So I'll do exercises like that with people where I make sure that we feel the permission and even the capacity to put sounds in different places in their vocal pitch range. And another great technique for this is to pick up a children's book, like Dr. Seuss or some children's book, because we give ourselves better permission when we're reading a children's book to be vocally diverse about where we go. But you're right. I think what happens is, again, it's unconscious most of the time. We start having this idea of what we should look and sound like when we present, especially in a language that's not our primary. And we start going into this box. And people don't realize that as you walk down the street, if someone were to jump out in front of you very suddenly, you might go, ah! Right? You might make a really high-pitched noise. I mean, men too, right? And then if someone challenges you, you might go, absolutely not. Right? So we use this crazy amount of range in our everyday voices. We have access to a huge range in our everyday voices. And as soon as we start going into a presentation mode, we think this is the only part of it that is, available to me as this smaller little box. But that's not the case. So a lot of times what I'm doing is just encouraging speakers to feel the full range and bring their full range into their presentation.
And one of the things that you can do is plan that. So if you find that you're going into monotone, then find a place in your presentation where you can let yourself get excited. Mm-hmm. So if you're going monotone and frozen-faced, and mm-hmm. only talking about this, find places where you can smile. Mm-hmm. And I have there's a couple of tools I use to remind people to smile. I'll be curious, do you have any tools that you give people to help them remember to smile or slow down?
Yeah, one of my favorite tools ever is something that I recommend for when people are on camera, because mm-hmm. You can't necessarily do it in the same way when people are actually already looking at you. But every time you start a new take of something, let's say you're recording a video of some kind, what I encourage speakers to do is the breathe out, get all your air out of you, breathe in and paste a smile on your face, and then begin, because you actually begin from the place of already smiling and having taken the breath that you can now speak. And so I call it the breathe out, breathe in and smile, and begin. And I should probably give it a catchier name than that, but at least it says what it is. And I think that trick is really, really helpful because then you start from a place where you want to be as opposed to working your way up to where you want to be. And that's really challenging. And that's just like you say, that's the reason for rehearsal, because rehearsal ultimately is where we're giving our nervous system, the cells of our body, the inflections of our voice, we're giving them permission to do things that we might not automatically do unconsciously. And once we have practiced giving ourselves that permission, it's so much easier to do it in front of a group of people while our adrenaline and our cortisol is high.
Well, and that's patterns again. So that's here you are dealing with the patterns of teaching your nervous system those patterns. So that's what the brain wants to do. This brings me to another question, though, because Elissa has a very cool YouTube channel, and I highly recommend looking her up, full of warm-up exercises. So can you give us a couple of examples of some of the exercises that you give?
Yeah. So actually one that already came to mind as we've been talking is what I call the zipper. A lot of theater voice teachers call this the zipper. And I don't even quite need to stand up to show this one to you, but basically you reach up high and then you're going to reach down low, and you basically allow your voice to go from high to low, back up to high, or vice versa. So let's do on an ah sound. You go up to the top of your pitch range. Yeah. So what I find is that gives people, because I do like to think about pitch as on the vertical axis, volume I think about as on the like kind of Z plane, if you will. And when a speaker is stuck in a pitch range, and then we do this exercise, we'll do it one more time. Ready? Let's do it on an ooh. Yeah, nice. And also it's a really good exercise for breath control. It requires a nice big breath to get all the way through that.
Yes, I noticed that I didn't really breathe to do that, and I was running out of breath, and I'm really thinking about my microphone right next to my mouth, thinking, oh God, they're going to hear me do this. So yeah, there's another one to it. And how do you deal with the, oh my God, I'm going to sound so stupid on this recording?
Yeah, so totally fair. It's funny, when I actually recorded that YouTube video with my videographer, he was like, Elissa, you're blowing out the mic. And I was like, I'm sorry. It makes sense. I really had to be temperate. But, you know, we're doing this exercise to find our pitch range. And then inside of it, now we can go, hi, everybody, welcome. I'm so glad to be here. Hi, everybody, welcome. I'm so glad to be here. Hi, everybody, welcome. I'm so glad to be here. We can start doing exercises to find vocal inflections and just break the patterns. But as you speak to, well, first let me say, in response to the idea of it being goofy, great. You know, like that part of what makes a good speaker is someone who is vulnerable. And that means that we can't be 100% polished. We have to show up authentically and vulnerably as ourselves in the moment. And so to be able to let yourself get a bit goofy, move your body in a way that you would normally move your body, move your face in a way that you would normally move. If you guys watch the How to Warm Up series on YouTube, if you click around and watch the different videos, they're all goofy. It's like, so goofy is a very important part of the equation, actually. So there's that. And then the other thing I was going to say is, in terms of another exercise, I thought it would be smart to do something for breath support. And I'm going to show something that actually ideally would require a much longer explanation, but I think it's useful to bring into our awareness. So our voice is here, sure. Our voice box, and for those listening, I'm pointing to my throat. Our vocal cords are in our throat, yes. However, our power source for our voice is actually, in my opinion, down below. Think about a garden hose. The way a garden hose works is not just that you point it in a direction. You have to actually turn on the hose first, right?
Yeah.
So our breath support is akin to turning on the hose, right? And our breath support actually, I believe, comes from our low belly, like down here, down above our pubic bone, below our belly button. And essentially think of it like this. Think of it like a toothpaste tube is another good metaphor. When you squeeze the toothpaste tube at the very bottom, all of the toothpaste is going to go up and out in the useful direction, which, by the way, that's the only way our voice can get out. We cannot send our voice out through the holes at the bottom of our body, right?
Right.
So our voice goes up this way. So when we squeeze the toothpaste tube at the bottom, when we draw in our low abdominal muscles for support as we speak, and I'll be a little clearer about this in a second because we don't have to overdo it. But when we use our low abdominal muscles, when we're connected to the guts of us as we speak, all of our voice travels in this direction. If we squeeze at our throat, if we squeeze at our rib cage, if we squeeze somewhere in the middle, then some of the metaphorical toothpaste will go down and get stuck. And then we need to do more work later to get it out. So the most efficient pattern, in my opinion, is squeezing the toothpaste tube from the bottom. And if this helps anyone at home resolve a dispute with your partner, you're welcome.
Okay.
So
said, as you're doing this, I said, okay, I'm setting up to make sure that I have a column of air here instead of, I was sort of slouching back because of, I record from lots of different places, and this particular location is an awkward chair. How do you get past, I just one other thing to say is that a lot of people, when they get nervous, they might clench the lower abdomen.
Yeah.
And then they forget to breathe, and they only breathe from the top up, and they're talking like this. So how do you train yourself out of that habit when you're nervous and when the adrenaline's going?
Yeah, so it requires training outside of the nervous situation and then blending it into the situation over and over to get better. But I so appreciate that you said that, because I'll just demonstrate for a second for those of us watching the video that, and I'll give you a little bit of description as I do it. So my hands on my low belly, below my belly button. As right now I'm going to make an SH sound. As I make the SH sound, I want to be gently drawing my low belly in. Shh. And one thing that you'll notice is essentially when I squeeze my low belly in, when I gently draw, it's kind of like Pilates, drawing my low abdominals in and up towards the front of my spine. When I draw in that transverse abdominis, those core muscles, my chest actually goes up a little bit. It actually, like, it's almost like you can see the metaphorical toothpaste moving through the tube, the column of air, as you say, rising, right? But the most important thing is after I go shh, what do I have to do next in order to allow the next breath?
Breathe in.
I have to let go. Yeah, exactly. So I call this the let it go exercise, or you can do it with hey. So it could be shh, I draw my belly in, and then I let go, and the breath comes back in. Shh, I draw my belly in, then I let go, and the breath comes back in. Or hey, I draw my belly in, and I let it go, and the breath comes back in. And when I do this exercise, especially with women, especially those of us who have been holding in our belly for a long time because of whatever reason, including body image issues, the let it go part is the hardest part. Like, we know how to draw our belly in. The question is, can we let it go? And is it valuable to do sit-ups at the gym? Totally. Is it valuable to have access to like this rock solid, strong ab thing? Sure. But as human beings, ultimately, we're in the game of dexterity. We're in the game of having many different options for how to breathe and how to communicate and how to stay alive, ultimately. And so this pattern is a really important pattern to train for speaking, that I use my low belly support, and then as I breathe in, I let it go.
So actually, it's just like going to the gym and realizing that you've been spending all this time working on your abs and you totally forgot to get your biceps going. So
totally.
Yeah. So this is just another tool to use. And I think this is really fun, Lissa. I'm so
glad.
So I really hope that we can continue this conversation offline one of these days.
Yeah.
Tell us quickly, how can we learn more about you? And if someone's listening to this and understands why it matters, then let's talk about how can they learn more? How can they learn some of these exercises?
Yeah. So one thing, as you say, is to go to my YouTube channel, which is you can look up Elissa Weinzimmer, my name, and or voice body connection. And you'll find all these videos, the How to Warm Up series and beyond. Also, of course, like if you want to actually be connected to me, the best thing is to go to my website so that we can be connected. I'll say that I work with two different types of people. And it is likely that in your audience, actually both types of these people exist. One method of training that is part of my own story of having lost my voice, as you spoke about at the beginning, is that I had muscle tension issues that were gripping my voice. And basically, if we go back to that hose metaphor, I had a tangled hose that I needed to untangle. So if you're listening to this and you're finding yourself having vocal fatigue issues, or like hoarseness, or really just having trouble literally making sound, then that's some of the work that I do. I teach a class annually called Release Your Voice, which is a very robust approach to untangling vocal tension. And then the other portion of my clients are entrepreneurs, founders, and also, of course, people working inside companies who are looking to have more, looking to have more confidence and presence in their speaking. And that side of things is I run a mastermind group with clients. I have a podcast, as we mentioned, called How to Speak Your Truth. I have a community that people can join to do warm-ups with me in the mornings and practice embodying and speaking. So essentially, if you go to voicebodyconnection.com, then one of the useful tools that you'll see right there at the top of the homepage is a quiz that will let you know which of these categories you fall into. And then I can help kind of send you in the right direction for the type of training that would be most useful for you. So yeah, head to voicebodyconnection.com.
So Elissa, thank you so much. This has been a conversation with Elissa Weinzimmer, and all talking about how to make your voice better, because it matters. It really affects how you are perceived. Basically, only 7% of what people perceive about you comes from your words. The other 93% is who you are in the room, and your voice is a huge piece of that. So yeah, this is really great. Thank you so much. I'm Elizabeth Bachman. This has been Speakers Who Get Results, and I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.